This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer?
Experts in the Wire, episode 108. Henneke D. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 108 of Experts on the Wire. My guest today is Henneke, and I came across her article, 29 Ways to Improve Your Writing Skills and Escape Content Mediocrity, which is an awesome title, and we're going to chat about that soon. And I knew that I had to have her as a guest on Experts on the Wire. In fact, huge thanks to Giselle Navarro, who was a prior guest on Experts, for connecting us. Henneke has written for Copyblogger, Kissmetrics, and is the author of 2 5-star rated books about writing and blogging. And I really wanted to bring an expert on writing onto the show to teach us how to make our content better. Because in my 10 plus years of SEO, content quality is by far the core ingredient that I've noticed that really helps support long-term rankings and SEO success. So if we can all improve our writing, we can improve our SEO. So get ready to take notes or head over to evolvingseo.com/wire, where we will have all the show notes ready there for you. This is going to be a good one. Henneke, welcome. How are you?
Yes, I'm very well and honored to be here.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to begin and ask a little bit about your background. As I understand, you were not always doing copywriting and helping people with their blogging. So what were you doing prior to copywriting?
Yeah, my background is really in marketing. So I worked for several companies, big and small, as product manager and later on as marketing manager, marketing director. And I quit my corporate job in 2012, not really knowing what to do, but I had sort of picked up content marketing and I had started learning how to write. So I thought, well, I just start to write.
Yeah.
And I got my first guest post published on Copyblogger and on Kissmetrics. And I just had inquiries for people from businesses to write for them. And I just was, flabbergasted because I thought I didn't see myself as a writer. I had just started writing on the side for a bit of fun and to figure out what I wanted to do. And I'm not a native English speaker. So it had never crossed my mind that people would ask me to write for them. But when they did, I thought, well, that actually might be fun. So I started freelance copywriter and later went into coaching. So yeah, it's all very much just happened without really planning it so much.
I'm curious how you landed your guest spots for sites like Kissmetrics and Copyblogger. I know a lot of listeners either themselves try to guest write for other sites or want to help their clients do that. So were you introduced or did you already know folks at those sites? How did those guest spots happen?
I was introduced to Copyblogger via John Morrow. I was doing his guest blogging course. At that time, he was still connected to Copyblogger and he would occasionally make that connection. I don't think that's possible anymore at this stage.
Yeah.
And Kissmetrics, I didn't have a connection. I just contacted them and they said, yeah, give it a go.
That's great. And John Morrow is, I believe, smartblogger.com.
Correct.
Great resource.
Yes.
And so what is your first language if English is not your first language? And is English something you learn later on? I think it's incredible how well you write, and English being not your first language.
Yeah, my first language is Dutch. So I grew up in the Netherlands. I started learning English when I was 12 at school. It was actually one of my worst subjects at school. I wasn't that keen on it. But then when I quit university, I went to work for international businesses. So I had to speak and write English. And I worked in Hong Kong for a while, where English was then the main language. In the business I worked in, of course, it's Cantonese as well there. And then I moved to the UK. So I've been in the UK now since 2002. So I mainly read and write English. So I think that helps a lot.
And I want to ask a little bit about your profile slogan. I think it's excellent, and we're going to talk a lot about how others can improve their writing. And I think someone's profile is often an overlooked place where anybody listening can go and improve your own profile or that of the company that you work with. I'm going to read yours, and I'd love for you to maybe describe how you came up with it or what it means to you, and maybe a tip or takeaway that listeners can take from hearing this profile. So it says, Henneke is an irreverent marketer and copywriter on a mission to stamp out gobbledygook. I love that. So is that something that you've refined over time, or where did that come from?
Yeah, it didn't come up in my mind that easily. It took me a few weeks probably to find it. I think the way it's built up is, I am a writer. And that is, everybody is something, I'm a consultant, I'm a whatever.
Yeah.
And on a mission too. And then you can just fill in something what you're on a mission to. But the problem is that a lot of businesses are on really boring missions,
Yeah.
They turn something run of the mill into a mission, and that doesn't work. So I think you need to have something there that really shows that you're passionate without saying that you're passionate, because passionate is one of those other words that are so overused. So you have to, add a little humor or whatever, an interesting word to make that mission sound more interesting. And then there is the adjective be irreverent, which that took a while to think about, what really defines me and what is different from in what I do compared to others. And I think it's very much that I'm very independent minded, want to do things my way, the way I think they're right to do. I'm not stubborn, but I think irreverent portrays me quite well. I do things really very much my way, in a quiet way. I'm not an extrovert. I call myself more a quiet rebel. But yeah, so I think people can think about adjectives that describe them well, that help them stand out from other people. Yeah,
I love that. We'll put that in the show notes, and you can always take that and use it like a template in a way to come up with your own profile.
Yeah, I've actually written an article about that as well, so we can put a link there if you like.
Absolutely. We'll add that to the show notes. So before we talk about how the listeners can improve their writing and their writing skills and just create better content, I'd love for you to take a moment and just tell us like the distinct products and or services, or however you frame them, that you offer, so the listeners have an understanding of sort of what it is that you're doing on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis.
Yeah, I'm actually in the process of changing my business model. I have been teaching intensive courses where I work with a group of 20 odd people on either copywriting, so writing sales copy, or on blog writing. But my courses have been selling out so crazy fast, and I've been disappointing so many people,
Yeah.
I just was like, I have to change this. So I'm now changing them into self-study courses with more examples, more guidance, so people can actually learn better writing and copywriting themselves. Yeah.
Excellent. So let's chat about how the listeners can improve their writing, create better content. As I mentioned, you have a really great article, which we'll link to, 29 ways to improve your writing skills. And in that, I want to jump to part 3. Now, the whole thing is great. And by the way, your entire blog is fantastic. I wish we could talk about everything you've written about it. It's really incredible stuff. But I want to focus...
Don't tell me you've been binge reading.
I have been. I want to focus on part 3, specifically part 3, 4, and 5 in this article, because it focuses on the actual content itself. And part 3 talks about structure. And in this, you talk about headlines, captivating openings, and closings. So I wonder if we could start by talking about what makes a really great headline.
Yes, I think a headline needs to attract attention and needs to entice people to click through. So that is quite a lot to do in just a few words.
Yes.
So the way to attract attention is, for instance, by using numbers. Mm-hmm. Numbers, when you write them as digits, stand out in social media streams. So that is a way to attract attention. Or another way is to use unusual words or power words. Like a word like pizzazz is a weird word, and it stands out because of the letter Z that isn't that used so much, and there are four of them in a word, so that can attract attention too. Or words that are really powerful, like mediocrity is a word that everybody shivers a little bit thinking about a word like that, or any sensory words. Like creepy or bland or brilliant. Words like that stand out and attract attention.
Sorry, go ahead. There's a lot of lists out there online. In fact, I think you have some on your site of power words and words that you can look at for inspiration.
Correct. And it's really useful to create or use an existing list, and then add your own words as well. Because I think there is really, there's something about personality there as well. Some people use very strong negative words. Some people use a lot of swearing. I use more sensory words, a little softer, almost sometimes like baby words, like soothing words. So I think, power words is not only about being very blunt and strong. You can have power words that are softer and more nurturing and more huggable even.
Yeah.
And I like a lot of words that are related to food, so I use them a lot in my writing.
Yeah, I saw one about Godiva and how to make your content, I forget the word you use, but tasty or delicious or something.
Yeah. About blog titles, yeah.
Great. And so, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and then the second step is to entice people to click through, and you do that by promising them, giving them a reason to click through, promising what they will learn, how you will make their life better, or what mistakes you help them avoid. And I think that is really important, and often the more specific you can be, the better. Like sometimes you see like a headline about how to write a business plan, and you think like, whoa, I don't want to read that,
Yeah.
You do then is, okay, this is how to write a business plan on the back of a napkin,
Right.
And you immediately make it more specific by just adding that, because people think like, okay, I can actually do this maybe in quickly without thinking about the textbook style blog about business planning. So it's important to be specific about what people will learn from you. There are exceptions, of course. The post you wrote about with the 29 ways to improve your writing skills, that is not very specific, but it still works because the 29 is interesting. It makes people think, okay, I'm sure I know a few, but there are sure a few that I don't know. So I want to check that out. So there's an element of curiosity there as well.
And where do you think the line is between clickbaity and actually a good headline? When I present this idea of writing good headlines and using power words to clients, that's often their first response is, well, we don't want to do clickbait. And so where's the line there, and how can people avoid that?
Well, clickbait is really, there's two ways to create curiosity. You have the gossipy kind of curiosity, and that is what a lot of clickbait is targeting. Like a father, I don't know. I'm struggling to think of one because I don't read these things so much, but it's always something, this happens, and then see what happened next, you know?
Right.
And it is quite gossipy. It makes you want to click through, but you don't really learn something from it. And I think what most of your clients and my clients and most people in our blogging world do is they actually write educational content, and they want to teach people something and help them solve a tiny problem or help them towards achieving an aim. And that is a very different type of curiosity that you try to arouse. That is really about learning and knowledge. And I think that is completely different from the clickbait titles.
Agree.
Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. I'd love to chat about a captivating opening, especially because in the SEO world, I know that getting users to click is important, but if they land on your page and bounce off, that sends bad signals to Google. And one of the best ways to improve that is by having a captivating opening. So how can the listeners improve their openings in their content?
Yeah, I mean, the objective of the opening is really to promise people what they will learn in the post so that they read on. And you want to do this quite briefly. What happens a lot with openings is that people start writing a blog post and the opening is kind of a warming up, you know?
Right.
and that is just normal in writing. You start just, you know, you don't really know how to get started. So you just start and you write something. And if you go back and delete half of what you started with, then your opening is usually a lot better already.
I do that all of the time. I'll write 3 paragraphs and delete the first 2. And finally, by the third one, I'm actually into the meat of it.
Exactly. Yeah. I have a different tactic that works for me is I write my opening last.
Right.
So I write the main body first, the tips, and then I write the opening because the opening is so important. And I just feel too much pressure to write a good opening if I start there. So I start to procrastinate. Mm-hmm. So I write the main body of the post first, and then I go back and I write an opening, really trying to imagine a person struggling with the problem I try to solve in the post, and then empathizing with them, struggling with their problem, mentioning it, thinking about how they're feeling about it, and then promising them, okay, firstly, you're not alone. This is quite normal, and I'm going to help you solve it, you know?
Yes.
And that is a real good way to keep your opening short and to get people to read on and to really read rather than scan.
When is it?
I think the boring openings really encourage people to scan.
Right. When is a good time to use story or not? I know some of your content uses a great story at the beginning, often even with dialogue, short sentences. This happened and then they said this, etc. When is a good time to use story or not? Because I could see in some cases, if it's a how-to article, that somebody just wants to know how to do something. They don't want a story at the beginning. One thing I often see people complain about on Twitter is, landing on a recipe and the recipe has 3 paragraphs of, some story about that person that has nothing to do with the recipe, and that bothers people. So where's the line there? How do we know when story is good to use or not?
Well, the story always has to be relevant.
Right. I
mean, we're not telling a story just to tell a story. So if I start with a story, I always keep it very short. My stories are, sometimes I have a whole post that is like a story. But if I use a story in an opening, it is really, really short. It's only, I don't know exactly, maybe 7 sentences or so, 10. I don't know exactly. And those sentences are really short. I think that is a good tip as well. The opening needs to breathe more even than the rest of the copy. And I think people often start writing really, really long sentences. And that is a real turn off for readers,
Yeah.
Especially in the beginning. So start really, really short. And the other thing that people do is make really obvious statements,
Yes.
Like, it is important to write an engaging opening, Yeah. Yes, of course, we all know that. So you don't have to start that. But, that is what we were talking about, the warming up. That is often a sentence we start writing with, but it's so obvious, so we have to delete it. So yeah, I think storytelling is great, either in the opening or straight after the opening, but it has to be really, really brief and has to be relevant. It has to illustrate something. If it's a story, people have to find themselves in the story, and think, yes, this is me too,
Do you ever use tools like Hemingway app or anything that finds run-on long sentences? I know sometimes I will recommend those to writers that work with clients that I work with. So any apps like that or others that you find useful?
Yeah, I mean, Hemingway, I recommend to people, but I always recommend that they don't follow all the advice, Yeah. It is very, very easy to kill your writing by following all the advice. In the end, you are the writer, so it's your choice. And it's not true that every long sentence is bad, It is about the average. Readability is about the average of the sentence length and the average of the word length, and about the passive voice. And Hemingway or the readability score you can use from Word, has it too, are useful tools for it. But please don't chop up each sentence that Hemingway tells you is too long, and don't delete every single adverb because Hemingway tells you it's an adverb, because sometimes it's fine,
I agree. That's exactly how I like and recommend to use those tools as well. So we're still in part 3, structure, part 3 of your post, part 1 of the discussion. I want to chat a little bit about a good closing. This is something I've struggled with probably the most in my writing, is just a great way to close something. Sometimes I'll just end it without any, I'll just do a hard ending without anything, for lack of anything better. But you have a great article that's linked to from this post called How to Write Closing Paragraphs. We'll put that in the show notes. What are some tips there for writing a good closing?
Yeah, it's really going back to your reader and why you've written the post. And I mean, you write a post because you want to share some tips and help them solve a problem. So the tasks of the final paragraph is really to encourage people to action that, to do something with your tips. So it really depends. If you have a long list post, one trick is to tell people, okay, this may feel like a lot, so why don't you start with this or that, So really cut the overwhelm. Or another way to do it is to remind them of why you've been sharing the tips and what difference it will make to their business or their life if they actually implement it. And quite often you can go back, circle back to your opening. That's a really nice way to make a strong structure, is you go back to what you had said in the opening and remind them, okay, that was the problem. And if you want to feel better, then this is what you're going to do. It doesn't need to be a lot, Good closings can be quite short.
I want to share an example from your post, option 4, give a pep talk. I really like this. It's something that I've never actually really done in a piece of content I've created or would think to do. Your example is from, I'm not sure if this is your article, it is on Smart Blogger. It's called How to Catapult Yourself from Diddly Squat to a Booming Online Career. Is that your article?
Yeah, that's the article writing about the start of my online career when I quit my job. Yeah. Yeah,
and your I'm just going to read a little segment of your closing. The closing begins with, you may feel overwhelmed. You may even be intimidated by others bragging about their huge following, launch success, and the amount of money they're making. But remember, everyone starts at zero followers, 0 subscribers, 0 profit. You may doubt whether you're able to pull this off. That's normal. And you continue on like that. I really like that. I'm wondering if you could pick apart what's working here about this pep talk option and how others could apply that to their content.
Yeah, I mean, the pep talk is really thinking about what is the biggest objection that people are the biggest stumbling block they are facing to actually implement your advice. And sometimes that is self-doubt, or it's overwhelm, or technical issues, whatever. And so you just mention that, you just tell them head on. Yeah, it is normal.
Yep.
That at this stage, when you start your career, you feel totally overwhelmed and you look at others and you think, wow, I can't do that because I don't have any Twitter followers and I don't have a Facebook account and my website is like almost nothing. And don't worry, just get started. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
So it's really about thinking about what is stopping people from implementing your advice.
I like that a lot. So we're going to move on to part 4 from your article, which is how the basic writing skills everyone must master. Again, I want to reiterate the one thing I really love about writing that's different than coding in a way, or it's something technical, is it does take a lot of skill to write well. But it is something, at least from my personal experience, is easier in the sense that I don't need to go code something to make a quick change and implement it. So I just want to remind the listeners, whether we're talking about like a good heading or good closing or the next tips we're going to talk about here, it's something I feel that anybody can go to your last post you wrote and look at your closing and look at the options that we have here in the article, which you can find in the show notes, and find a way to improve your closing. And I just really like the immediacy of a lot of these things that you're sharing. So in part 4, you talk about 7 basic writing skills everyone must master. The first one is to create a logical flow. I'm wondering if you could talk through your process a little bit for coming up with a flow of content. This is something when I work with writers through my clients, I find that this is often a struggle point for a lot of writers, is just logically going through a topic. So I'm wondering if you could break down your thought process there.
Yeah, I really like to see a blogger as a guide, and you take your reader from a rainy situation, his problem, through the jungle to a sunny beach.
Yeah.
So it's really thinking about what are these steps that the reader has to take to actually arrive at that sunny destination, whatever that might be. And, often the really simple structure is to just have 3 tips that get you towards solving a problem. And then with each tip, give an example of how to actually do that. I mean, that is really the easiest way to write a blog post. First, you have define the problem. Mm-hmm. And you touch on it in the opening and you promise that you're going to solve it. Then you have the 3 tips that get there. And for each tip, you give 1 or 2 examples of how people have done it. And then you write your final paragraph. You think about what is stopping people from implementing this. Mm-hmm. And you try and overcome that.
I'm curious.
I mean, there's so many different ways to do it, but this is really the easiest structure, and almost any article can fit a structure. Yes, sometimes you have 2, sometimes you have 4 tips, but that works for a lot of topics.
Sometimes in the SEO world, we encounter a keyword that is just representative of a topic. So, for example, privileged access management. That was an actual topic a client in the past wrote an article about. Or another example, spot price. This is something from the world, I believe, of precious metals. Or you can even have the topic of just content marketing. And so oftentimes in the SEO world, somebody wants to write an article to rank and be authoritative for just a topic. The user in the keyword hasn't given an indication whether they want strategies or ideas or tips. So if you wanted to create a piece of content that is just sort of an overview of a topic like privileged access management or spot price, how would you approach that in terms of thinking through the structure or the flow?
Yeah, so when you think about topics, it is useful to think about whether a topic is either big or whether it is tiny, because you approach it in a different way. When you talk about a big topic, then you have usually quite you don't have a long tail key phrase. It's a short one. Mm-hmm. It's a big topic. It's very competitive. And in this case, you can only give people like a helicopter view of a topic.
Right.
So you really have to think about the topic. Okay, you can do a mind map and think about everything that is related, and then organize that mind map into sections, 3, 4, 5 sections. You can group it, and then you create a post that just gives this high-level overview and links to more detailed information.
Right.
If you look at the post that we've been discussing here with the 29 ways to improve your writing skills, that's exactly how that post is built up, Yeah. There is, I can't now remember whether there's 5 or 6 different sections, and each section covers a number of different topics, and each topic links out to more detailed information. So if you have a big topic, create a mind map and then organize it in a limited number of sections and link out to more detailed information. If you have a, Sorry,
do you have a mind map tool that you use, or is this as simple as grabbing a whiteboard? Or
I prefer, a whiteboard or a piece of paper, and I like colored pencils so I can change colors. But there is also good mind mapping software. I think it's called is it Scapel or something?
We'll look it up.
I can check it.
We'll put some in the show notes, sure.
But I think don't make things too complicated, just sometimes brainstorming on paper is the best, you get in a different sort of mind frame when you start scribbling things down. So, that is really how you think about big topics. Then tiny topics is more like long tail key phrases.
Yes.
Where you can really go in depth and give people real actionable advice. And then it's often really thinking about, okay, what is the problem here that this key phrase is related to, or what is the aim, or what is the question? I think topics becomes a bit difficult if you talk about a tiny topic, about like, in my case, how to write a long sentence. It's really like how to. That is really a how-to. Then you're not going to. You really have to think about what question you answer with such a blog post, or what problem you solve, and then you go to the structure we talked to before. The intro, where you touch on the problem or the question, the 2, 3, or 4 tips with lots of examples, and then the final paragraph.
I'd love to chat a little bit about transitions. That's one of the sections in your part 4, the 7 basic writing skills. And then I want to talk about the advanced writing skills. But what are some tips for transitions? This is another area that I know doesn't always come easy for me, especially if I'm still trying to just figure out the general structure of a piece of content. But how can we create better transitions in our content?
Yeah, I think this is something what you do in the editing phase. It can really slow you down if you're still trying to organize your thoughts and get them on paper. Then starting worrying about transitions slows you down quite a lot. So just get on paper what's in your mind, and don't break that train of thought, because if you start editing and break that train of thought, then it can take a lot of time to really refine what you wanted to actually write. So a
lot of it's about when you try to improve your transitions. So you're saying to not do that in the drafting phase, because you'll...
No, correct. The drafting phase is just rough, And then when you start editing, you make it more concise, and you make sure that the transitions work. And transitions, can be at the end of an opening. The transition is about making sure that people read on, and a question can often be really simple. You promise people what they learned, and you say sound good, or sounds familiar, or something like that, and then people read on or want to know more. That's a really simple way to create a transition.
Right.
And then if you have like sections in your post, transitions are not that important often, At the end of a section, is more important to wrap up the section than to start on the next section.
Right.
So it's important to have like a strong ending sentence that really, they call it a clincher, to say, okay, this is what we've learned and this is why it's important. And then use the subhead to encourage people to read on.
Let's chat a little bit about some of the advanced writing skills. I've found a lot of these fascinating. What is the zoom in, zoom out technique? That's really cool.
Yeah, the zoom in, that's really one of my favorites. And that is really what makes the biggest difference between good and great writing often, Zoom in, zoom out is about when we want to explain trends or the big picture of something, we tend to talk really in abstract terms. And it's really quite boring, and it doesn't really breathe, it doesn't jump, it's boring. So you zoom in by telling a specific story to illustrate your big thing, So it can be a mini case study, or I use a lot of examples from writing to explain things, or it can be, you see, it's with journalism a lot, they write just a story about one person and then they relate it to a bigger picture, so that you really understand what the problem is and why it is important, because you can see a person is struggling with something, I was reading this article about that you have all these crowdsourcing things for, especially in the States, but also now starting here in Britain, for people with medical procedures.
Oh, right.
And actually how bad that often is, how depressing if you start asking your friends and family and to help solve a medical issue and you don't get any money,
Right.
And there were, statistics in their post about how few people actually met their crowdsourcing targets. And if that was just an article with all those statistics, it would have been boring. So it zoomed in with some real specific painful stories about people who were trying to crowdsource for a life-saving procedure and failing to do so.
I'm wondering if
that is what zooming in and zooming out is about. Zooming out is the big picture, the trends, the statistics. Zooming in is the small story that really shows the what difference something makes.
I'm wondering if I could ask about applying that to a topic that a recent client was writing a piece of content around. The topic was how to save money on international travel. It was something similar to that. I changed it a little bit. So this is a how-to. It's a little consumer focused. It's telling them how to save money when traveling. Could you use the zoom in, zoom out technique with that piece of content, with a how-to? Would that be something that would, maybe get in the way of that? Yeah, definitely. You can tell a story of somebody who saved a lot of money. I remember a story of somebody, traveling around the world. Well, they only had to do a small distance because it was cheaper, Yeah.
So if you can find some real stories about people who actually save money and what that meant for them, what did they do with the money they saved? They could spend it on their holidays, and then talk about the stats and the tips.
Yeah. It instantly, just hearing that makes it more interesting, even though we're talking about a hypothetical example. It's just that contrast of the detail versus the bigger pictures. Very interesting. I wonder if we could talk about metaphors. You have an entire article linked to from the 29 Ways to Improve Writing article. We'll put that in the show notes as well. Could you start by just even I always forget the slight nuances between metaphor and simile, for example. So I want to quickly define the metaphor, maybe for me, maybe all the listeners know a metaphor and this is just for me, but let's define metaphor and then talk through some examples of how those can help your writing as well.
I really don't care whether something is a metaphor or a simile or an analogy. I think that is just, that it is important in one way, but it's not really that important. And I think it's distracting to really focus on that.
Right.
I think that is, I'm sorry, I don't want to sound blunt here.
No, that's
but
great.
I really think that is how high school teachers approach these things, and they make us think that is really important. And I think that takes some of the joy away, because it's really about using metaphors or analogies or whatever in a good way in your writing, and what you exactly want to call it. I really don't care that much. So what it really is about is comparing things on two completely different things. So, for instance, I've written a post about weak words, and I compare the process of replacing weak words with more powerful words, with spicing up your cooking, Mm-hmm. So that is a metaphor.
Yeah, your example is your writing is like mashed potato without salt. After one bite, I've had enough.
Yeah, that is also a metaphor.
Yeah. I like that example. You talk about three elements that make great metaphors. What are those three? And I can, if you don't have the article open, I can say them. We could talk through them. But there's three elements.
Yeah, please don't test me.
Sorry. You say that they should be simple, unexpected, and concrete. Often the one I struggle with is unexpected. I find when I sit there and I'm going, I have to make this seem unexpected, that I can't, that's hard for me. So how can you make something unexpected?
It doesn't have to be majorly unexpected. You can sort of riff off an existing metaphor and just give it an unexpected twist, like talking about building a business is like a marathon, that is quite a common metaphor. It's not that special, but then you could say, okay, but there's one big difference. With a metaphor, you know exactly where you're going. And with a business, you might not really know exactly where what's going to be around the corner.
Yeah.
So just by changing it a little bit, you can or add some details, then it just becomes less cliche. Then it immediately becomes more concrete too.
Absolutely. You have a couple metaphoric mistakes. One is a metaphoric cliche. What is that exactly, and why should we avoid these? Yeah,
I think what happens with visual language is that over time, initially it's really interesting and it works, but then at some stage it becomes a bit overused. So there are a lot of, phrases like ballpark figures, knocking it out of the park, thinking out of the box,
Yeah.
That is just all a bit tired. At some stage, you can say, like, we don't even think about the box anymore, and it just becomes standard language, but then it's not that powerful anymore. So it's really thinking about, and it's really hard sometimes to know whether something is cliche or not. So
yeah. You throw it in quotes and Google it. See if other people have used it.
If it's used a lot, then probably it's cliche. Or just ask on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly.
People, is this a good phrase or is it cliche? I bet if you're in doubt, then it probably is.
I'd love to touch upon.
And I don't want to say it's always bad. Sometimes it's okay because it's a phrase your readers will understand and get, so that is good. It just becomes bad when it is cliches all the way.
Right. I often find it's good to avoid those cliches in the opening. One phrase I often pick on is when people put "gone are the days" like as their opening in their first sentence, because I immediately tune out when I see that, because it makes me think, well, this isn't going to be very thoughtful, right? Because it's not super unique. So maybe just choosing where to place your cliche metaphors wisely is good too. I'm wondering if we could touch upon achieving a conversational tone. I know some businesses struggle with this, where their blogs end up sounding, corporate or very stockish. Not like in stalking somebody, but like a stock photo, and bland. So how can businesses especially achieve a more conversational tone? I think they might fear, seeming unprofessional perhaps, or too casual. So how can businesses improve their conversational tone?
Conversational doesn't need to be super casual, You can define what conversational means for you. It's just a more engaging way to write, and it doesn't mean that you have to use slang. I don't use slang on my blog because I have a lot of international readers, but it feels conversational because I really write always for one person, and I think that is the starting point, to have a real good idea who your ideal reader or your buyer persona is, and to really think about their problems and their struggles and their aims and their dreams and their desires, and to really write to help them with that. And that already makes a big difference. And then make sure that you sometimes add a question in your writing. Using questions is a real great way to engage people. Seeing a question mark instantly makes them stop briefly, think about it, and then go on. So don't use too many because it becomes too slow.
Yeah.
And if you use them in the opening, then use questions that people will nod yes to, so that they want to read on. But then later you can ask some questions to encourage people to implement the stuff for themselves as well. But using the word "you" and using questions are big things for conversational writing. And then, of course, it's about word choice. But there it is still very wide-ranging how conversational you want to be. So it's definitely, you want to avoid the marketing cliches, and depending on your audience, you want to try and avoid jargon too. I mean, if you write for a professional audience that uses the jargon themselves, then it's fine. But if you're writing for a lay audience, then avoid the jargon. And that can make a big difference. But writing as one person to one person, and not writing from a company to a crowd, that really makes a big, big difference.
Yeah, I've heard Tim Ferriss say to pretend you're writing an email to your best friend after 2 glasses of wine or something like that is a good mental approach there. I've also heard people say write like you talk, yet the article says a conversational tone doesn't mean write like you talk. So I'm wondering what the difference is there.
Yeah, I mean, people who talk use a lot of for instance. And when we talk, we also don't always use proper sentences.
Right.
We just start a sentence, change our minds, and then move on. Or we repeat something that in writing you don't really need to repeat. So writing is a lot more concise than talking. And also, because with talking, you have intonation, and you can speak louder or you can whisper. And if you're face to face, you can also use hand gestures and facial expressions to add strength to what you're doing, what you're saying. But with writing, you don't have that. So writing tends to be a little bit stronger. This is why what we touched on before, power words are so important, because you often want to up the volume a little bit and write in slightly stronger phrases than you would use when you talk.
I would love to chat next about business blogging. I know a lot of listeners are blogging and writing for business purposes. You have a really great article about attracting clients to your blog. In that, you talk about the difference between copywriting and blogging. I'd never really thought about this before. So what is that difference, and why is it important to keep these two things in mind?
Yeah, with copywriting, you're really writing to get a specific action from a reader. So often that is to buy something, but it can also be to sign up to your email list or to download something. So it's really a specific action you try them to take. And with blogging, that is really more educational writing, where your objective is to get a reader to implement your advice. So there are similarities and there's overlap, because when you write sales copy, you also have to educate people about what your product will do for them. But it's a slightly different way of writing than blogging, which is more into, getting people to implement your advice, because that is in the end how you will really build your authority as a blogger. When people read your stuff and think that sounds great, but don't do anything with it, then it's quickly forgotten. But if they actually implement the advice and see the difference that it will make, then they become a loyal fan, and then you can turn them into clients or customers.
Yeah, and in the article, which I think is great, you talk about blogging, think about blogging as being on a mission. And this circles back to the very first thing we talked about, which is your profile, where you said you're on a mission to stamp out gobbledygook. How can thinking of your blog as being on a mission be helpful? And what are some examples of maybe how somebody could frame their blog as being mission-based?
Yeah, the mission is really thinking about your clients and what you help them achieve. So you have to be specific about who your target audience is, and then what you can do for them. So if you are a yoga teacher, you could write a blog for instance, veterans who want to find more peace in their life and overcome the stress of PTSD,
Yeah, I like that a lot. That really helps.
But it can also be very different. You could also target, 40 plus women who want to age more gracefully. So it's very different.
Yeah, and I like that. It immediately, I think of a blog as like a publication, and then the copywriting is the specific words and details in that publication. And thinking of a blog being mission-based immediately, again, in a hypothetical example here, just makes me interested and think about wanting to. I think one thing nowadays bloggers struggle with is getting people to subscribe to their blog. In the old days, we had RSS readers and things like this, where people are now just like following accounts on social media, etc. But I think framing a blog as mission-based immediately makes me feel like I'd be more interested in subscribing and like following along, because there's that sense of an overall purpose, which I really like.
And it's really about helping people, and it also, it really guides what you write about, but it can also give you great ideas for a lead magnet, which then makes it easier for people to subscribe to. I get quite a lot of subscribers because people really like my lead magnets.
Right. Yeah, because you're offering that utility along with the mission-based blog as well.
Correct. Yeah.
I wanted to chat a little bit about sales copy. Again, I think a lot of listeners they want to create copy that will result in a sale or some form of a transaction. You have a really great article about the Maslow marketing benefits. And you talk about the differences between a feature and a benefit. So I'm wondering if you could first touch upon what is that difference between a feature and a benefit? Because we hear that all the time. And even I have to sit there and go, well, what is that difference, feature, benefit? And then you offer up a question that writers can ask to help turn your feature into a benefit. So I wonder if you could break those two things down and then reveal what that question is.
Yeah, I think the thing maybe to clarify is that I usually don't recommend selling on a blog. I think the blog should really be to educate people and to build your authority and to really grow that connection with people, and then use email and your sales pages to sell. I think that generally works better and makes the whole structure of a website also clearer. So the difference then between features and benefits is features are an aspect of a product or a service, and then the benefit is what it does for the customer, how it makes their life better. So you can go from feature to benefit by asking, so what?
I like that.
So, for instance, you can say, this often has a preheat function. So what? Well, it heats up in only 3 minutes. So what? You don't have to think about preheating it half an hour before, and it's quickly ready to put your lasagna in. So what? There's less stress in cooking.
Oh, it's kind of like that thing where, like, what is that thing where you ask why 5 times or 7 times?
Yeah.
I really like that, because it's often SaaS is kind of the worst when it comes to this. Is you go to any SaaS website and they're talking all about their product features, but they rarely ever get to those benefits. And I hate to give those SaaS companies a hard time, but I think it's because it's an abstract product, right? Which is hard to solidify like that. But I like that a lot. And again, this is something, whether you're blogging on your own, you have your own site, or you work with a company, you can go to your homepage, go to your sales pages, and look at your copy and question if what you're seeing there is a feature or a benefit. And it sounds like, Henneke, what you're saying is sometimes people don't go deep enough into the benefits, because you asked so what 3 or 4 times there.
Yeah, and it really depends, sometimes asking once is enough, but it is good to really go deeper and to think about really what is ultimately what people want to achieve with it. And what they ultimately want to achieve often maybe is over-promising a little bit, if you would say it just like that, will make you happy or will make you healthy or will make you tons of money. But by using the different stages and weaving them, the different levels of benefit, weaving them into your copy, you can show people how actually your product can contribute to a stress-free life, even if it's just a small part of it, If you can save people time, that is a big benefit.
And the article is talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. How does that tie into benefits? So there's 5 needs here, but I want to connect the dots between understanding what these needs are, and you can talk through those, and then how to connect those to benefits.
Yeah, so the needs are really the more basic needs are financial security and safety and getting foods, and then you go up to love and belonging, and then higher up you get self-esteem and self-actualization. And what you often see is that people keep their benefits in the lower area. I thought that as well. When I launched my very first blogging course, I thought blogging was all about, and learning to blog was about business. People wanted to get a steady stream of new clients, and that's why they would blog. But I found that with my audience, there was a lot more than that. They wanted to connect with the readers, engagement, comforting them. That was really important for them. And also creativity and self-expression and finding ways to share your ideas in a more personal way, that truly connects. So while I initially thought that the benefit of a blogging course was all about getting more customers or charging higher fees, I found out that those benefits higher up the Maslow's hierarchy were equally important to people, the connection with the readers, the idea of community and the self-expression. And that is for a lot of things, if you think about selling wine, it's easy to think about just the taste of wine,
Right.
But and being able to pair it well with foods. But wine is often about so much more, It's about think about a wine. You have a dinner party, and seeing the smile on the face of your guests, saying, "Wow, this is a good wine. How does that make you feel?" There can be some aspects of exclusivity as well. This is a special wine that makes me feel good that I can buy this. So it is easy to really think about just the basics. Making more money, saving time, but quite a lot of products and services and courses somehow connect to those levels higher up, the Maslow hierarchy as well, like love, belonging, community, self-expression.
I love that. Could this be applied to something like CRM software, right? So super B2B, SaaS-based. I could see psychological needs and security and things like that. Like, it saves you time. Maybe it allows your business to be more profitable or be more efficient. Things like that. Is it possible to even tap into these higher needs with something that seems so commonplace or so ubiquitous, like CRM software?
Yeah, it can. If you implement it, CRM really well, it's a way to get closer to your customers and make them love you more, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
So there you go already.
Darn, I was trying to think of a hard one. Okay, here's another example. How about I worked a long time with a company that makes these like metal nameplates that go on like fighter jets and or plates that just go on a piece of equipment, right? To like give the ID number and the spec number and things like that. Is it possible to apply this to a quote unquote boring product like that?
I think if they're really commodities, then it becomes hard, unless you create an exclusive club or community, I don't know whether people whether it becomes collector's items,
Yeah. These were hard products to do marketing on, by the way.
Yeah, you have in what I was thinking here in the UK, you have an trucks, a haulage company, and their trucks have all women's names. So each truck has a different female name, and that is really people really. There's clubs of people who want to spot every truck with every name, and they collect it.
Yeah,
something crazy like that. But then you go a bit beyond the basic product. So if your product is really just a commodity, then it is hard. But if you can create some feeling, some sense of community or exclusivity or a way to express yourself, if you can customize that ID plate, I don't know. It might be something special to collect ID plates of fighter jets too,
Yeah, it's possible.
So there are things like that. The way you also have wine clubs where people feel that they are supporting the wine growers because they're giving them security up front that whatever they make will be sold. So there's not the feeling that there's no connection there. When you buy in a supermarket, then it's just a bottle of wine of a winemaker. But if you're of the club, there is this closer connection.
I want to share one example from your post, and then we'll wrap things up in a moment. But you mentioned a company called 53, which I had not heard of. Apparently, they make some sort of stylus. And of course, Steve Jobs famously in his talk mentioned about how people hate styluses, but he addressed the 53 addressed people's fear of using a stylus by saying, our adaptive palm rejection instantly knows whether it's your hand or pencil touching the page. Rest your hand on the screen, write from any angle, no calibration or setup. You'll forget you're creating on a tablet. So I really like that, but what is the need point that they're addressing in this example here?
Yeah, that is still wanting to have this feeling of an expression that you get that feels differently when you have a real pencil on a sheet. I started learning how to draw only a few years ago, and I draw my own illustrations for my blog now. Mm-hmm. And I still do that analog, because of the feeling. There's something special about feeling the colored pencils on a sheet of paper. And I think if you can mimic that on an iPad with a stylus, there's something special about that.
Yeah, there's some really great examples in this article. And as always, I'll link to this article and all of the ones we talked about today in the show notes at evolvingseo.com/wire. Okay, last question. You hinted at this a moment ago. I'm wondering if you could tell us who Henrietta is.
Henrietta is my alter ego. It's like Henrietta is like the English version of my name, Henneke. Mm-hmm. And she's a little bit more outgoing than me and a bit braver. Mm-hmm. And I created her. I took a cartoon drawing course a few years ago. Mm-hmm. Because I was really fed up with stock photography, and I found it such a waste of time to try and look for good images, and I struggle with finding good images. So I thought I wanted to make my own illustrations, but I hadn't been drawing since school, so mm-hmm. It was quite a crazy idea. But that course helped me create Henrietta. Which is, my cartoon character, and she's really on all my blog posts, and she inspires me and my readers too, I think. Yeah. I find it really fascinating how you can combine words and really simple images to say a lot more than just with the words, and you don't need to be an artist to make simple images. I've become a real big believer in, she's just she's more or less a stick figure, a dressed up stick figure.
I believe Ian Lurie at Portent, if I'm saying that correctly, did a study a while back, we'll put it in the show notes, where they tested stock photos against cartoons, like just stick figure cartoons, and cartoons outperformed stock photos in user studies, which I think is very telling.
There's something with cartoon figures where people can recognize themselves in it because they are so simple, and
it just looks so personal. And they're
good for expressing emotion too.
And I think when people, similar to that opening sentence that is cliche, gone are the days, when people see a stock photo, that to me immediately makes me think, well, I don't think there's going to be much interesting here if this photo isn't super unique. So I think seeing a cartoon, even if it's a hand-drawn stick figure cartoon, adds a lot of personality and really makes a site stand out and makes it personal.
Yeah, and if you limit your color palette, then it's a really great way for branding as well. Mm-hmm. I really hear this so often. People just recognize my pictures straight away in social media streams. So they really know instantly it's me. And they really relate to Henrietta.
That's great. So as we wrap things up here, tell us again where we can find you online, your website, so anywhere you want to send the listeners.
Yeah, well, the main place to go is enchantingmarketing.com. And when you get to my homepage, there's a feature for a snackable writing course for busy people. Mm-hmm. So if you want to improve your writing skills but don't have a lot of time, that is a real good way to get started. And you can also find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Henneke D. Or feel free to connect on LinkedIn or Instagram.
Great.
I don't have a Facebook account.
Me neither. I avoid it.
Oh,
I avoid it a lot. Yeah. Well, Henneke, thank you so much for joining us on episode 108 of Experts on the Wire, and we'll talk to everyone next time.